Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Oh, man. Oh, man. That one was tough. Stillman and Company, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Excuse me. That one was tough. Stillman and Company, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical here on the program. It's a special Stillman and Company edition. It is post-game live. Vanderbilt loses to Alabama 30-14. It was tied 14-all going to the break, and they end up losing. And I have to tell you, I'm not a Vanderbilt fan. I've said this many a time. In fact, as I have said many a time, I am now a Louisville fan, and I've got Louisville, Virginia there in overtime. I've got that on in front of me, and so I'm keeping an eye on that as well. I'm not a Vanderbilt fan. I grew up a Vanderbilt fan. I wanted Vanderbilt to win. Make no mistake about that. I like the coach. I like the school. I like the athletic director. I wanted Vanderbilt to win. And I, at no point this week, thought that Vanderbilt was going to win that game. At no point during the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was Yom Kippur, so I tried not to think about the Vanderbilt game. Friday, and most of today, I was on Sirius XM all morning, and we talked Vanderbilt, Alabama. It was the game of the week. And I said, look, when I see those two helmets next to each other, I just don't think they match up. And then when they played in the first half, I thought Vanderbilt was going to win. I really thought Vanderbilt was going to win the game after the first half. I thought during the first half, Alabama goes down the field. They go for it on fourth down because their kicker stinks. And boy, he stinks. And so they go down the field and they throw an interception, which again didn't really matter because it was fourth down. And if the guy from Vanderbilt knocks the ball down, then they get an even better, field position. So it didn't really matter. And then Vanderbilt runs the ball up the middle for a 65-yard touchdown. And I looked at my dad and I'm like, oh my God, Vanderbilt just ran the ball up the middle on South Carolina. Excuse me, on South Carolina. Vanderbilt, my brain is going to mush. Vanderbilt runs the ball right up the middle on Alabama. And then Vanderbilt gets the ball back. And Vanderbilt, they were throwing the punches early in this game. And I actually thought for a second, I thought for a second, I'm like, Vanderbilt's going to win. Vanderbilt is going to beat Alabama. And when Vanderbilt was driving, and it was 7-0 when Pavia fumbled the ball, I thought, oh no, those are the things you can't do. Those are the mistakes you cannot make when you're playing in Alabama. Not that this is Alabama. This is not a Nick Saban Alabama. Those are the mistakes that you just cannot make. And they made them. Pavia fumbles the ball, and he fumbled the ball by 1/10 of an inch as far as the knee versus the arm, and if the elbow goes down, he's down. Alabama goes down, ties the game. Vanderbilt scores right before the half. All the momentum, and I'm watching the clock, and Kalen DeBoer is calling timeout at the end of the half because he wants the ball back, and I'm thinking, even if they get the ball back, it's not going to matter much. Vanderbilt scores 14-7. They're getting the ball to start the second half. They have all the momentum outside of the Pavia fumble. Vanderbilt had dominated that first half. And then Alabama goes right down the field and scores a touchdown because Steve Gregory decided to call a blitz right there before the half on second down, and Ryan Williams gets free. So now it's 14-all going to the half. But Vanderbilt's getting the ball to start the second half. And again, I'm sitting here thinking Vanderbilt has got a shot. Vanderbilt is going toe to toe with Alabama. They have walked into Tuscaloosa, and this doesn't feel like David versus Goliath. In my opinion, it felt like two teams that were right there, somewhat evenly matched. Vanderbilt may be better. Vanderbilt gets the ball to start the second half. They don't do much. Alabama gets the ball. And then later in the game, after Alabama takes the lead, Vanderbilt needs Diego Pavia to make a play. And I tweeted it out. I said, Vanderbilt needs Pavia to make a play because Alabama had answered. And now here's Vandy, and they've got to throw another punch back. And Vanderbilt gets the big play on the fourth down where they hit the tight end and they're down at the 17-yard line. And it feels like Vanderbilt's starting to come back in the game. And Pavia throws the interception. And I tweeted it out when it happened. And I said, ball game. That was the moment where I knew, okay, I started to think Vanderbilt was going to beat Alabama. Ball game. It's 2014. You're in the fourth quarter. You're at their 17-yard line at this point. No matter what happens, the end result needs to be either 2017 Bama or 21-20 Vandy. They get the first down, and Pavia throws the ball right to the other team. And at that point, Vanderbilt's defense had been on the field for so long in the second half, there was nothing they were going to be able to do. Vanderbilt's defense, Vanderbilt in the second half on offense. First drive, 4 plays, 21 yards. Second drive, 3 plays, 6 yards. Third drive, 6 plays, 58 yards. That ended up with the Pavia interception, and that's when Alabama ran their 16-play drive and took 8:29 off the clock because Vanderbilt's defense was absolutely and completely, totally gassed. And let me say this. Again, I picked Alabama to win this week. I did not think that they would cover, and they wouldn't have without that backdoor cover there at the end. Holy crap, was that a backdoor cover if there ever was one. I did not think Vanderbilt was going to win until about midway through the second quarter, and then I thought Vanderbilt's going to win the game. I really thought it. The most disappointing part of this, there's 2 things that I find to be the most disappointing part of this. The first thing is, I thought if Vanderbilt was going to lose, it was going to be, hey, those boys just can't play with Alabama's best of the best. Because even though Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban, and I don't see a Derrick Henry out there, they're still Alabama. As far as the recruiting rankings and everything else are concerned, they're still one of the best teams in the country. Them and Ohio State. And so it is what it is. And Vanderbilt, they've made great strides. They're not the same old Vanderbilt that they used to be, but they can't match up with Alabama. That's what I thought the narrative of the game was going to be. Instead, I'm sitting here right now thinking to myself, oh, shit. They went to Tuscaloosa and pissed the fucking game away. They should have won that game. I'm telling you. And I'm not saying if they play 10 times, Vanderbilt's going to win 6 of them. I'm not saying that. But after seeing them go mano a mano, I thought Vanderbilt should have won the game. And the most devastating part about this for me, and I think for Vanderbilt fans, is the reason they lost today. I'm going to say it. They lost because of Diego Pavia. Diego Pavia cost them the game. And I said this to my dad after Pavia threw the second interception, when I said it is disheartening to say, because Vanderbilt is not in any position whatsoever for us to have expectations of them doing anything or for them not to be the doormat of the SEC if it's not for Diego Pavia. Regardless of what Clark Lee did and what Tim Beck's done and what Jerry Kill, none of this is possible without Diego Pavia at quarterback, and everybody knows it. But the reason they lost today was because of Diego Pavia. And Diego Pavia fumbling the ball inside the red zone and that killer interception. And he doesn't get it on fourth down when they run the RPO. It looks like if he chooses to give the ball to the running back takes it and puts it right in there for the first down. And it's tough because I felt like there was so much at stake for Vanderbilt in this game that I felt like if Vanderbilt had won this game, they would have really been not a shoo-in for the playoff, but I think they would have been in the driver's seat to make it into the college football playoff. And on top of it, if Vanderbilt had won this game, I think that the label that Vanderbilt has had, kind of the narrative surrounding Vanderbilt, what people still think when they see the Vanderbilt helmet, I think that would have gone away. And that's if they would have won this game. And they didn't win. And I don't feel like they lost because Alabama outplayed them. I think they lost because Alabama made less mistakes than they did. Especially when it was in the hands of Diego Pavia. The fumble, I understand. The interception, that was a killer. And I was really thinking about it too, watching that game, because Vanderbilt, Tim Beck dialed up some beautiful play calls, especially in the first half. But even in the second half, they get stuffed on fourth down on the RPO. They bring it back. And this time Pavia throws the ball to the tight end, who I think, what did they say? He never had a catch. Then he drops back, he throws the ball, and the tight end goes down to the 17-yard line. And now Vandy's got some momentum, and Vandy's got Alabama on their heels, and then Pavia throws an interception. And then at the end of the game, too, not that it really had that big of a difference, but Vanderbilt returns a kickoff, and they get a personal foul call. Vanderbilt football is not going to beat anybody by getting personal foul calls when they shouldn't get them. And then Vanderbilt on fourth down, Pavia throws the interception, and it gets called back for holding on Bama, but a Vanderbilt player hit an Alabama player out of bounds out of frustration. Again, you're not gonna get anything like that if you're Vanderbilt football and you're committing 15-yard penalties. So there is somewhat of a silver lining here, I think, when it comes to Vanderbilt. And the silver lining for me would be that, hey, at least if you find a way to beat LSU, who is nothing special, and if you find a way to beat Texas, because when it comes to Texas, they look like shit, Vanderbilt still has a shot to go to Neyland Stadium and maybe find their way into the playoff. None of which I'm expecting, by the way. I mean, I think they'll win one of the LSU or Texases, because I think LSU, Vandy, and Texas are all on the same level. But it is a killer today. And I don't know what Clark Lee's going to say. He was asked about the Pavia fumble on the TV broadcast, and he said, hey, look, we're not putting anything on Diego. We've always got his back. And I think that's exactly what he'll say after the game. But it's hard for me to look at this game and not say, if Diego Pavia plays like the Diego Pavia that we know, Vanderbilt wins the game. And again, what Vanderbilt could have accomplished for that school by winning this game. Oh, again, I never thought I'd be on the show talking about, well, Vanderbilt outplayed Alabama and they crapped the game away. I didn't think there was any chance that would be the discussion. I figured the whole discussion would be about, hey, Alabama is still in a different class than Vanderbilt. And when you look at the statistics, that's what it'll say. But if you watch that ball game today, I don't know how you can think that Vanderbilt and Alabama are not somewhat closely matched. Again, I kept seeing the two helmets next to each other on College Game Day, and I just couldn't in my mind think like, yeah, Vanderbilt's got a real shot to compete with these boys. And Alabama, to their credit, they took Vanderbilt seriously. It wasn't like they came out there and thought they were playing some Punch and Judy nobody. I mean, they took Vanderbilt seriously. And you see Vanderbilt run on the field. And you see Alabama run on the field. And you're like, this feels like a big-time SEC game. 2:30 ABC. You've got the number 2 crew, college game day. Like, that is a big-time SEC game. Vanderbilt doesn't play those. I mean, Vanderbilt used to play on CBS like once every 5 years, and it was because it was mandated by the SEC that Vanderbilt had to play a game on CBS at some point. This game, ABC wanted to put on TV because they were going to get big ratings. Gentry Estes, who's covering the game for the Tennessean, texted me today, and he said that up there in the press box, there's a ton of national writers, and they were there because of Vanderbilt. And so if Vanderbilt wasn't good enough to win the game, then I would have said, okay, Alabama's Alabama, but Vanderbilt's just not ready to compete at that level. But that's not what it was today. Vanderbilt played very well in the first half. They played well. Pavia's fumble takes it from very well to well. They played well in the first half. And Pavia was just a non-factor in the second half. I thought Steve Gregory, the defensive coordinator, I thought he called a good game for Vanderbilt. Outside of that blitz on second down at the end of the first half where they blitzed Ty Simpson and he hit Ryan Williams for the big game. I had a feeling that Vanderbilt's game plan was do not let Alabama run after the catch. They're going to catch it. They're going to pick up first downs, but do not let Alabama run after the catch and hold Alabama to field goals and play tough in the red zone. And I think Vanderbilt, for the most part, did that throughout the game. But that defense right before the first half, that totally fucked them. And then the offense not doing anything in the second half, that really put the defense on their heels. And then when Pavia threw the interception, that was essentially the ball game. And I think everybody kind of knew it. I mean, at 20-14, Vanderbilt at the 17-yard line has a real shot to score a touchdown and to take a 1-point lead. And it wouldn't have felt like if they had taken a 1-point lead, it would not have felt like Vanderbilt was in control of the game or anything like that. But it would have been, hey, they answered the bell. Now Bama has to go out there. It would have given the defense a break. It would have allowed the defense to not have to make some sort of miracle play. And Pavia threw an interception. So, again, big picture, as far as Vanderbilt, Alabama is concerned. First of all, if we're looking for a moral victory, I think you could have argued if Vanderbilt had kept it to 9 and it had stayed 23-14, I think we could have argued, hey, Vanderbilt showed that they are absolutely a top 20 team in the country. Vanderbilt showed that they're right there with everybody else in the SEC, including Alabama. But then when Alabama scored that touchdown at the end of the game, that was kind of the moment where now people are going to see 30-14 and they're going to think, yeah, Vanderbilt just can't compete with the big boys. And that's the part that's tough for me to accept. So, the second part. Vanderbilt, again, is in this position because of Diego Pavia. He's more important to what's happened on that campus for the last 2 years than maybe anybody else. He's more important than Clark Lee. I mean, we've seen Clark Lee without Diego Pavia. He's more important than Tim Beck. He's more important than Jerry Kill. And the reason those guys are so important is because they got Diego Pavia to go to Vanderbilt. But Diego Pavia lost them the game today. I know football is a team sport, but I think it's very obvious to me to put this one on Pavia. The second thing about the Pavia stuff that drives me insane is that I didn't like the stuff Pavia said during the week. The idea that, hey, if we go down there and we play our game, it won't even be close. McDonough and Greg McElroy were talking on the broadcast about Pavia saying, hey, we're going to blow them out. We're going to blow them out. And I'm like, dude, easy. Like, chill out for a second. Blow them out. Calm down. Wait until you blow them out. And then go out there and celebrate it. But there was a part of me that didn't go after Pavia this week, didn't criticize him for that, because I thought, you know what? Maybe Pavia's one of these guys who just talking shit makes him better. Like, maybe he's one of those guys that he talks a little trash, and yeah, you don't like to give the other team bulletin board material, but for Pavia, he talks it, and then it motivates him to go out there and back it up. I thought maybe that was the case. Well, if you're going to talk all that talk, and you're going to go over there and hug up on Johnny Manziel and Theo Vaughn, you got to do better than 198, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, a fumble in the red zone. Also, somebody's going to need to tell me what happened to Cedric Alexander, because he carried the ball 4 times for 76 yards and a touchdown, and then we did not see him really at all in the second half. And with that went Vanderbilt's run game. The other one where, again, and I put most of the loss on Pavia, but I do want to remember this. Early in the second half, I want to say it was the first drive. Pavia on second down or third down hits Junior Sherrill square in the hands and he just drops it. If you're going to go to Alabama and you're going to try to beat the Crimson Tide, you don't have to play a perfect game, but you can't drop balls that hit you square in the hands. And that, again, is crushing for Vanderbilt. Now, where do they sit in the SEC? I looked it up on FanDuel Sportsbook, and the number 1 team on Friday in terms of winning the Southeastern Conference, according to the odds, was Alabama. Granted, Alabama lost a game to Florida State, and Alabama has not lost in the SEC. And so FanDuel Sportsbook, and it wasn't like they were the overwhelming favorite or anything, but FanDuel Sportsbook considered Alabama the best team in the SEC. Again, I don't know if they're the best team or not, but I do know after watching the game today, I think Vanderbilt should be very disappointed that they didn't win this game. This is not a, hey, boys, hold your heads up high. You gave it all you could, but Alabama was just too good. No, it wasn't one of those. It was a, you went into Tuscaloosa, you threw the first punch, you had them on their heels, and you couldn't seal the deal. But number 2 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app yesterday was Texas. Now, Texas stinks. I didn't watch that game, but I know Florida stinks, and I know DJ Lagway stinks, and they got absolutely crushed by Florida today. I know that the final score was 29-21, but I mean, I was following the bottom score the whole time. Florida comfortably ahead. Apparently, Arch was 16 of 29, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Texas is not a special team. They played 3 nobodies, beat them all, lost to Ohio State, lost to Florida, who's not any good. So, as far as the SEC is concerned, Vanderbilt's schedule with the names on it, Alabama, LSU, Texas, Tennessee, it looks on the front end like it is some sort of unstoppable schedule. How could they ever compete with that schedule? And I have to say, LSU, they don't look so hot. And that game's going to be played here in Nashville. And Texas on the road, they don't look so hot either. Auburn stinks. UK stinks. So if they can find a way to beat Missouri at home, then they've got a real shot at making the playoff. I still think they're going to lose at Tennessee. I don't think that they're going to go on the road to Knoxville, Neyland Stadium, and beat the Vols. So I think they've got a real shot to still make some noise. I still think they're outside looking in for the playoff, but it's not totally out of the question, in my opinion, at this point. But man, it was there for them. They could have. It was there for them. They could have won that game. And Vanderbilt just blew it. 14 all at the half. I thought Vanderbilt played very well outside of the Pavia turnover and the defense right there before the half. And it just all went to shit in the second half. So, with that, let's get to some of your reaction so far here on the YouTube chat. Again, like and subscribe, please. Stillman and Co. on YouTube. We are close to 3,000 subscribers. Again, I'd like us to get to the point to where we're starting to, get into the 3,000 range and then the 4,000 range, and we just continue to go from there. Emily says, Diego is the reason they lost. I agree. I agree. I would not have said that coming into the day. I would have said, hey, if Vanderbilt's going to lose, and I picked Vanderbilt to lose. Now, I picked Vanderbilt to cover, and Vanderbilt did not. I thought they would lose by 10. They lost by 16 because they gave up a meaningless touchdown. If Vanderbilt were to lose, I would say, hey, they just don't have the horses to compete with Alabama. Yeah, Vanderbilt's got a veteran team, and yeah, Vanderbilt's added some players, and yeah, but again, this is Alabama we're talking about. And yeah, Alabama got crushed by Florida State, but Alabama wasn't ready for the start of the season. They went on the road to Georgia last week. They won. Ty Simpson is growing up. Clearly, there's something. That's what I would have said. And yet, Vanderbilt's got the lead. They've got Alabama on their heels. They're driving. They are, I think, about to shock that crowd. And Diego Pavia fumbles the ball. And again, it was a fumble by a tenth of an inch, but it still was a fumble. And then Vanderbilt's got a shot. Vanderbilt's got a chance. Again, it's only 20-14. They're at the 17-yard line. They just converted a huge third down. And Pavia, after a 33-yard pass with 12 minutes to go in the game, down by 6, throws an interception inside the red zone. You're not going to beat top teams going on the road and doing that, especially if you're Vanderbilt. And those were two mistakes that were Diego Pavia mistakes, and they were independently Diego Pavia mistakes. I'm not saying like Diego Pavia is a bum or Diego Pavia stinks or Vanderbilt should bench him or anything. I'm just saying Diego Pavia is why they lost. If Diego Pavia plays the way that Diego Pavia has played quarterback for Vanderbilt over the last 2 years, Vanderbilt wins that game. David said, I saw the interceptions, the fumble, the 0 second half points. They looked good, though. That's the hard part. Is going into the game, I thought Alabama was the better team. And then when I saw them matched up on the field and I saw Vandy run the ball up the middle for a 60-yard touchdown, I thought, wait a minute, Vanderbilt might be able to hang with these boys. And then when I saw Vanderbilt's defense early in the game hang tough with Alabama, I thought Vanderbilt can match up with these boys. And then when Vanderbilt scored right before the half, knowing they were getting the ball to start the second half, I said, oh my God, they're up 14-7. They're getting the ball to start the second half. Tim Beck has called an incredible game. And then they let Alabama go right down the field, the 2-minute drill, and score a touchdown. And even then, okay, it's 14-all. Go to the break. Momentum kind of fades. And Vanderbilt came out in the second half. And again, it wasn't to me like Alabama did anything special. It was just Vanderbilt and Pavia in particular. They couldn't make that big play. They couldn't throw that counter punch back. And it's so, when we talk about the game of inches, Pavia's fumble was by an inch because the knee hits down about 0.2 of a second after the ball comes out. I thought it was a good call when they called it a fumble, and when I watch it, I thought it was a good call. I'm not one of these homers that's like, oh my goodness gracious, there's no way they could have. No, I'm not talking about that. It was a fumble. And then Ty Simpson, who had a good game. And Ty Simpson has gotten better. But as that's all going down, I'm watching him and the one time that he kind of fumbled, and they ended up saying he fumbled and Vandy ran it into the end zone for a touchdown. And by the way, the guy for Vanderbilt that ran that ball into the end zone for a touchdown that ended up getting called back, he wore number 22. And I swear to God, he's clearly a linebacker. I swear to God, I'm like, oh my God, this guy looks like Derrick Henry. But that's just an aside. So they end up getting that touchdown. Before that snap, I said to my dad, I go, Vanderbilt needs a turnover. Like, they desperately need the turnover to get them back in the game. And Ty Simpson fumbles the ball. I thought he was down in live time. They show the replay. And by, again, an eighth of an inch, he didn't fumble. And it was the right call by the replay booth to bring it back. And that's the tough part, because that was the game right there. Curtis says, everyone's running on Alabama. What happened? Yeah, genius. They run a new defense, a 3-3-4. They are a passing defense team now. Yeah, okay. I'm going to tell you. I think the consensus amongst the Vanderbilt, well, I think the consensus was that, hey, this is a really good team we're about to play, but this is not Nick Saban's Alabama. And I will tell you right now, that is not Nick Saban's Alabama. They may win the national championship because I have no idea who's any good in college football right now. I thought Georgia was good. They lost to Bama. I thought Ohio State was good, but the only thing that they've done is they beat Texas. And Texas stinks. I thought that Penn State was good, although I never really bought the James Franklin thing. But you take Oregon to overtime, probably pretty good, and they just got beat by Nico and UCLA. I have no idea who's good in college football and who's not. So Alabama may win the national title, but I don't see it. I do not see this Alabama. They do not remind me of the Nick Saban Alabama teams. And you can tell me it's the change in scheme. I mean, the touchdown that Cedric Alexander ran into the end zone, my grandma, who's 93, could have run through that hole into the end zone for a touchdown. Greedy says, Vanderbilt better hope that Texas doesn't bench Arch Manning by then. Again, I didn't watch the game, but it sounds bad. Like, the stats look bad. The whole thing just looks bad. I watched him play Ohio State, and for the first 3 quarters, Arch was horrendous. And then I actually thought in the fourth quarter, Arch threw some nice passes, had some drops, had some miscommunications, whatever. But holy smokes, go lose to Florida. The coach is already packing up his house. The moving trucks are in the driveway. So I don't think Texas is very good. So if Texas isn't very good, how many teams out there are really good? To start the season, all the college football savants told me that LSU was good. They're not. Texas was good. They're not. Penn State was good. They're not. Clemson was good. They're not. Although, how about Belichick today? Holy crap. That guy, what an embarrassment. Belichick is a freaking joke. So disappointing. James said Pavia had his worst game of the season at the worst time. I also thought Stowers looked off. Credit to Bama. Vanderbilt still has a legitimate chance at the playoff. I don't think Vanderbilt has a legitimate chance at the playoff. I think I would say Vanderbilt has a 10% chance at the playoff. They have to beat LSU. They have to beat Missouri. They have to beat Texas. They're going to beat Auburn. They're going to beat UK. That means they could then lose to Tennessee, because I don't think that they're going to go to Knoxville and beat Tennessee. Sanchez says, boy, I was quick on the Arch train. Pavia is a big fish in a small pond. He's a small fish in an ocean. Well, I'm just on the Arch front. I will tell you, I was having a conversation with Caroline about this because we were doing a bunch of Sirius XM before the Ohio State-Texas game. And I said to Caroline, I was like, do we buy the Paul Feinbaum hype? Because Feinbaum was on TV during the summer every day being like, Arch Manning's going to be the greatest player in the history of college football, and you'll see, blah, blah, blah. And obviously he is not. But I was like, do we buy that Arch Manning is going to be worth the hype? And there was no way to know because we had never seen him play. Jordan Rodgers was sitting there saying the opposite, saying the tape doesn't match the hype. And I'm like, what tape? He started 3 games against Scarbini Tech and crap bum state. So how am I supposed to know if he's any good? I have no idea. And I said, if I have to pick, and this is like picking red or black in roulette, I'd say, yeah, I think he's going to be good. And boy, he stinks. So I was on the Arch train too, only because, again, it was kind of like well, I guess I'll buy the Manning hype. I'm in. But I never, like, Feinbaum signed my name to Arch Manning's the greatest. I don't think Pavia is a small fish in an ocean. I think Diego Pavia is still a really good player. And I think today, I wonder if the whole, again, being the man on the big stage, hugging up on Theo Vaughn and Johnny Manziel, and I wonder if that affected him. Because the Pavia I saw against Virginia Tech, and granted, that was Virginia Tech, but the Pavia I saw on the road at Virginia Tech, the Pavia I saw against South Carolina, that guy was so cool, so calm, so collected, and nothing was going to slow him down. So I wonder if there is a just chance that maybe the whole thing was a little too big. Oh, my goodness gracious. Let me tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I absolutely love Hiller. They take great care of my home, and I promise you they can do the exact same for you. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They've been in business since 1990, and they are family-owned and operated. With 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be, the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work that is performed, they will make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com. Again, I use Hiller at my home. I absolutely love them. They take great care of my house. They can do the exact same for you. Do like I do. Just pull it up on the phone, happyhiller.com. You can put in, you put in a service request, and you get a text message 3 minutes later being like, they'll be there whatever day you tell them, whatever time they have available. They'll be there then. And they keep you up to date the whole time. They're great. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporter of the National Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. Also, a reminder that Postgame live tomorrow as soon as Titans and Cardinals goes live. And yes, I think the Titans are going to get blown out. By the way, I just want to throw this in there. Did you guys see the Kaharski report? When it about the NFL and the kicking ball situation and Brian Callahan not knowing the rules again. And it was a terrible look for Callahan last night when Paul put that out there. And Paul even had the video that the NFL sent to the teams in which Walt Anderson says, see how Tennessee screwed this up because Brian Callahan doesn't know what he's doing? And everybody was like, Callahan's got to go. He doesn't know the rules. I already knew Callahan's got to go and that he doesn't know the rules. Like, this isn't breaking news to me that Brian Callahan is a total dope. I already know that. That's not a surprise. What I find fascinating, and I don't even know if anybody else on the planet cares about this, but what I think is crazy is I want to know where Paul got that tape. Because the NFL sends that to 32 teams. They don't send it to Kaharski's house. So one of the 32 teams had to give that incriminating evidence of Callahan's doofusness to Paul. And so we can, I would say comfortably, say that that wasn't the Titans that gave that to Paul, which then takes it down to 31 other teams. I don't know this for a fact. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything without knowing any facts. And Paul would deny this even if it were true. I think it was Vrabel. I think it was Mike Vrabel that gave Paul Kaharski that tape and said the NFL is making an example out of the Titans' stupidity because Mike Vrabel's petty like that and probably takes enjoyment about how bad, takes enjoyment out of how bad his replacement has been. Like, you thought you were better off without me. Look at you. You can't win a game, and you're the guy you hired who's so much better than me because he was a nice guy. He doesn't even know the fucking rules. Ha, 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 ha. And I'm not mad at Vrabel for that. I don't have any beef with Vrabel doing that. I just wanted to point that out. All right, back to the Vanderbilt game. Again, Vanderbilt loses to Alabama, and I wish I could put a happy face on this. I wish I could say, hey, they went to Alabama and they didn't get completely blown out, although that garbage time touchdown for the backdoor cover does make the score look a little lopsided. 30-14 is closer to a blowout than, hey, that game was right there. They were neck and neck, and then Vanderbilt just turned the ball over in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden the game got away from them, and they're calling timeouts, and Bama's trying to run out the clock, and that's it. But I take no moral solace out of Vanderbilt losing today. If you had told me ahead of the game that Vanderbilt was going to be tied at halftime and they still were going to lose the game, I probably would have said, you know what? That's probably to be expected. This is Alabama we're talking about after all. I'm sitting here watching the game, and now watching Vanderbilt give it away to Alabama today, I'm sitting here thinking, man, they would have had a real shot at the playoff. And now that shot at the playoff is gone. That shot, it's just, again, I say 10% chance. But they could have won today, and they could have, and it's like, and yet this is Vanderbilt we're talking about here. It's not like when Clark Lee and Pavia got up there at SEC Media Days and started talking about we're going to win the national championship, or we're going to, that I actually entertained that like there was a real possibility that could happen. And yet I have to say, for Vanderbilt's sake, I'm a little bummed out. I'm a little bummed out that they lost today, because after watching them on the field, I thought that they should have won that game. And I have to put that on Pavia because, again, he turned the ball over twice inside the red zone. James says, no more moral victories. They lost. Pavia was not clutch and got humbled. I did, again, it's very much hindsight. And I think there's a reputation when it comes to talking heads of first guessers, second guessers, and man, it's easy when you're not the one out there doing it. It's easy when you're not the one out there making the decisions. And so I try to respect that as much as possible, knowing that the backbone of sports commentary is criticizing the coach and the general manager and everything else. But what bothers me is that I was a little nervous during the week that Diego Pavia was doing too much talking. That Diego Pavia was doing too much feeling himself. And again, I have no problem with the relationship with Theo Vaughn. And I even defended the College Game Day for their decision to have Theo Vaughn be the guest picker. And the Alabama fans, oh my God, they were so upset about that. Like, they're so entitled that every time game day comes to Bama, which is like 6 times a season, that they have to have an Alabama person be the picker. They had Theo Vaughn be the picker, which, by the way, I now know where Theo Vaughn lives, because Theo Vaughn was on his show talking about how he lives in Derek Mason's old house. And during COVID, the Vanderbilt coach, Derek Mason, and during COVID, I actually realized I lived really close to Derek Mason. We would sit in his driveway, and I'm not going to tell you where. We would sit in his driveway during the COVID shutdowns and just talk for hours. I went out. I remember it was like a Saturday one day. I went out on a long walk. He went out on a long walk, and we ran into each other. We just sat in the driveway and talked football for like 3 hours. He actually had a line that I still use today when he was talking about the transfer portal, and he was talking about players that had entered the portal. And he was like, man, some of those kids out there just sitting out in the portal, they're like old vegetables in my garage just rotting away. And we all laughed about that. But so when Theo Vaughn was on game day and he said, I live in Derek Mason's old house. I'm like, I know where that is. So I understand like that's kind of his persona, Pavia, but I felt like he was doing too much talking during the week. And it's like Sean McDonough said on the broadcast, when he's like, you can do all the talking, but you got to back it up. And it did not feel to me today like Diego Pavia did any of the backing it up. And that's the part that's tough. And I wonder if there was a play today that got Pavia on tilt or off kilter or whatever, because that didn't look like the same Diego Pavia that I'm used to watching. I think it was very good. Greedy says he was just following the Castellanos playbook. It worked for him. Yes, Thomas Castellanos, he talked all that shit, and they did beat Alabama. What was it that he said? He said Nick's not coming to save him. I'll give him credit for that. That's a tough one for Vanderbilt. Caleb says, if you had told me at the beginning of the season that Vanderbilt would be 5-1, I would take it. Congratulations, Bama. Hopefully, we will see you later in the year. I got to tell you, normally, and I don't know if it's a recruiting ranking thing, I don't know if it's an NIL thing, if it's a transfer portal thing, or whatever you want to call it. I have no idea who's good in the SEC and who's not. Because the difference between Tennessee and Georgia was an eyelash. Again, kicker misses the kick. That's the difference between UT and Georgia. The difference between UT and Mississippi State, an eyelash. That was the difference. The difference between Vanderbilt and Bama, again, it's 16 points on the scoreboard, but it was an eighth of an inch on the Pavia fumble, an eighth of an inch on the non-Ty Simpson fumble. That's the difference. And so it kind of feels to me like there's no dominant team in the league, and all the teams that everybody thought going into the year that were going to be great are not. Texas is not great. They've already lost twice. So again, when I'm trying to think who's going to be in Atlanta for the SEC championship game, LSU, they beat Florida, and the coach has to get up there, and he has to defend how awful their offense is, and then they go out there against Ole Miss, and they can't move the football. And I know people are going to want to tell me Ole Miss is really good, and maybe they are, but it's not like beating LSU to me is that big of an accomplishment. They could have gone run, punt. LSU can't score. So I don't know who's going to end up in Atlanta. I don't think it's going to be Vanderbilt. James says, I think Bama is legit. Also, Missouri is being slept on. I talked to somebody in the NFL the other day, and he kind of brought this up to me unprompted. And I was watching the Alabama game today, or watching Alabama's offensive and defensive lines, because I was surprised at how Vanderbilt was getting into the backfield against Alabama. Again, this is new to me. Jordan Rodgers once told me years ago, I asked him, I said, what do you think is more likely? That Vanderbilt could beat Alabama in 100 tries, or the Sounds could beat the Yankees in a best-of-7 series? And he said the Sounds and the Yankees, and it's not even close. And I said, why? He goes, because the Sounds have a AAA pitcher, and that AAA pitcher might be good enough a couple of times to go out there and shut their bats down. The kid the Yankees pitched the other day against the Red Sox, Cam Schlittler, was in AAA earlier in the year. So that kid can pitch for the Sounds and shut down the Yankees on a given night. And this was back when Derek Mason was the coach at Vanderbilt and Nick Saban was the coach at Alabama. Jordan said, Alabama could take the ball and run it up the middle on every single play, and they'd win the game. And I'm watching Alabama's offensive line, and I'm watching Vanderbilt's pass rushers get into the backfield, and Vanderbilt stopped the run. And I'm like, what happened? And I go back to what somebody in the NFL told me this week, which they said, the reason why NFL offensive lines are so bad is because what used to happen was you needed a lineman, you would just go to college and draft one. But now there's about 3 guys a year that come out of college that are ready to play in the NFL. He said there's about 3, and they all go at about pick 6, 7, and 11. And that's it. And I said, that's true. He goes, the offensive lines in the NFL are shit because the offensive lines in college are shit. And so when it comes to the SEC, in years past, I feel like we've really been able to just see with our eyes right away, okay, who's got the offensive and defensive lines to be able to dominate in the SEC, because that's the one thing that's going to travel every single week. And in today's era of college football, there just aren't those kind of offensive and defensive lines. I remember in 2019, Georgia played at Vandy, and they housed them. And I remember looking at the offensive line for Georgia and just how big those boys were. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle of the Giants, was the Georgia left tackle. And Cade Mays was on that offensive line. And Isaiah Wilson was on that offensive. And Isaiah Wilson was huge. And I just don't see that anymore when it comes to these offensive lines. So that's why I don't know who's good in the entire SEC. I have no idea who's going to be in Atlanta for the SEC title game. And I'm sure the TV networks absolutely love it. Joe says a zebra cannot change his stripes. Pavia, talking trash, was just being himself. Why change up? That's how I felt during the week. And again, I look at Pavia and I hold this against him because I felt like Diego Pavia cost them the game with his play. I throw in the second part of I didn't like it. I didn't like all the talking. I didn't like that. I throw that in there after the fact because Pavia didn't play well. Maybe it had no effect on how he played. I'm just saying, if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And in the past, Diego Pavia has been able to walk the walk. And today, I felt like Vanderbilt's defense, for the most part, did their job. Pavia didn't do his. And that's the tough part. James said, Vanderbilt finally has an offensive and defensive line, the best it's ever had. That is another reason this loss hurts. This loss hurts because going into it, no matter how big of a Vanderbilt fan or supporter you were, I think you went into this game thinking Vanderbilt probably didn't match up with Alabama. That's certainly how I felt going into the game. That Vanderbilt did not match up with Alabama. They just didn't. Mano-a-mano, they just weren't good enough to compete. The recruiting ranking said that. The preseason ranking said that. Again, it's Alabama. And I know Vanderbilt has the oldest roster in the SEC. And I know Vanderbilt has an exciting quarterback and maybe the top tight end of the country and good players. I mean, Vanderbilt has good players. Martell Height's a good player. Miles Caper's a good player. Like, those are good players. But I think if you're being honest with yourself, even if you're the biggest Vandy homer out there, you probably knew that they weren't going to match up with Alabama. Then we watched them on the field. And I think it's safe to say they completely matched up with Alabama. And that's why it hurts. Because after having seen the game, there is a legitimate chance that Vanderbilt should have won. And nobody who didn't watch that game is going to have any idea that Vanderbilt competed and that Vanderbilt, again, if Pavia had played the way Pavia played last year against Alabama, Vanderbilt would have won the game. They would have had no idea. I once dated somebody who was an Arkansas Razorback fan. Random, I know. But for about a year, I watched Arkansas sports. And the thing about Arkansas is Every Arkansas game against Alabama, against LSU, against every good SEC West team when the SEC had an East and a West, every good Arkansas game was a close game, just like today's Vandy game, and then the final score, LSU 48, Arkansas 24. And if you didn't watch the Arkansas game, you would just think that LSU is better than Arkansas. But if you watch the Arkansas game, you would see how painful it was that Arkansas dropped that game the way they did, because it was there. This game was there for Vanderbilt. But if you just look at the score, you'll think, yeah, Vanderbilt's a nice story, but they're not ready to compete with the big boys. Greedy says, where do you think the AP poll ranks them now? There's a fair chance some of the AP voters just checked the box score. That's the other thing, is when it was 20-14. I said, if Vanderbilt can keep it like this, so if Vanderbilt loses the game 2017, let's say they kick a field goal, defense holds tough, they go back and forth, the clock runs out, 2017 Alabama, Vanderbilt goes up in the polls because Alabama's number 10, Vanderbilt's number 16, Penn State is going to drop, Texas is going to drop, a bunch of teams are going to drop, Vanderbilt probably goes from 16 to 14 or something like that. Now I think Vanderbilt goes to like 22nd, which I don't think is fair. I think they're better than that, but that's where I think they're going to go, because I do think these guys are going to check the box score. Okay. A couple of just little college football nuggets. What the hell happened to Penn State? I mean, I spent not a lot of time, a couple of minutes today, criticizing CBS for what has to be one of the stupidest decisions in television history. You know, CBS made a really stupid decision in 1994 when they decided to give up on the NFC package, and that's what allowed Fox to become a network, was because Fox paid $400 million when CBS was trying to negotiate with the NFL the difference between $220 and $250. And so CBS made that mistake and later had to pay millions and millions and millions more for the AFC package, which is nowhere near as good as the NFC package, because the NFC package has Dallas and Philadelphia and Washington and San Francisco and the bigger markets. And CBS gave up the SEC game of the week because they didn't want to pay $300 million to the SEC. A couple of years later, they pay for the second or third best Big Ten game. They pay $350 million. And I said, nobody is going to watch Penn State UCLA today. Nobody. Now, I didn't watch Penn State UCLA today, but somehow Penn State went to UCLA and lost. Somebody has to explain that to me. Maybe Rick Neuheisel's kid, who's calling the plays for UCLA because their offensive coordinator left in the middle of the week last week, maybe he's just the difference maker or something. Or maybe James Franklin just didn't have those boys ready to play. But I have never believed in James Franklin. I thought James Franklin was a great coach for Vanderbilt to kind of get them out of the mud. But James Franklin has lost every single important game he's ever played at Penn State. That guy will never win a national championship. And so I didn't see what happened in the game. I just saw the box score, and I'm like, how did Nico drop 42 points on Penn State? Unbelievable. So that one I didn't see. The other one is Belichick. I'm sorry. They need to fire Belichick. And I know you would say that is not fair to fire a coach right after you hired the guy. I've seen enough from Belichick. I would have never hired Belichick. I kept saying at the time, if you've got the choice between Will Stein, the offensive coordinator at Oregon, or Belichick, you should take Will Stein. Trust me. But I didn't think Belichick was going to be this disastrous. I mean, I tried to watch that game. That game was over 5 minutes into the game. And I said to my dad when we were watching the Vanderbilt game, I go, If I were an athletic director and Bubba Cunningham moves on at UNC and they put me in there, I don't think I'm going to try to have a improvement program with Belichick. I think I'm just going to fire him. You're not teaching that old dog any new tricks. I know Jordan might be trying to teach him a new trick or two, but I'm not. Goodbye. Belichick. Woof. Is James Franklin the Jeff Fisher of college football? It's probably fair. Okay, that's our Vanderbilt postgame live today. I really was excited about what this would be like if Vanderbilt won. And unfortunately, not only did Vanderbilt lose, but Vanderbilt, they had a shot. Okay, a reminder, we'll be right here, same place, same time, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. We will be here, same place, same time tomorrow for post-game live after Titans-Cardinals. We will see if the Titans can surprise everybody the way Nico and UCLA surprised everybody. We'll see. Thank you for watching 440 Sports. Like and subscribe. Curtis says, say it, Jared, roll Tide. Let me say this. I was a Saban guy, because Floyd and Saban were friends. And when Floyd passed away, Saban called me. And I always was rooting for Nick Saban. I'm not an Alabama fan, but I'm not an anti-Alabama person. Roll Tide. There you go. See you all tomorrow after the Titans game. Stillman and Company, 440 Sports. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Get us over the 3,000 followers. We continue on. See everybody tomorrow.